All right, it's Sleepers Day here on the channel. If you guys have been around here for the last 5 or 6 years, you guys know how this works. We have a handful of sleepers that I have been fiending over all summer. If you've been following the podcast channel over in the Bootleg Football Podcast, we're doing deep dives into every single team, every single division. You know, we call out value plays for every single team as we go along. So if you've been following the podcast, these names probably won't be a surprise to you. But these are also probably names that your league mates are mostly completely ignoring. So truth be told, my objective today is to make sure that you also are not completely ignoring them. By the way, one more thing before we kick this thing off. If you've been wondering where the fantasy rankings are this year, and you're not already in the Patreon, you already missed their release. They came out before preseason week 1 over on the Patreon. For all patron tiers, by the way, even if you're in the dollar tier, you get access to the fantasy rankings because, as usual, they cost $1. I'm not here to charge an arm and a leg. It's an Excel sheet with fucking names on it. It doesn't warrant me charging like $100. So you can get it for $1 in the Patreon dollar tier, or if you're in the $5 tier, which also gives you access to the patron-only room on the Discord server. One added benefit if you're in that tier is before every single Monday Night Football game this year, or at least most Monday Night Football games this year. There's some weeks where I have to do it on Tuesdays, but before Monday Night Football kickoff, we're going to be doing a Q&A session over in the patron-only part of the Discord in the voice server. So if you're interested in that, go check that out. The link in the description below. There's multiple tiers over on the Patreon. Again, it helps support the channel, and I appreciate all of you that do that and that help us build this thing. I'm very awkward with plugging my own stuff, as you could probably tell. So enough of that. Let's talk about the first name. To put it into perspective how special a physical talent Luke Musgrave is, Kentley Platt, who runs Relative Athletic Score, or RAS for short, he went back to 1987 and looked at the athletic profiles for 1,104 tight ends to enter the league since that time. That's 36 years of tight end prospects, and Luke Musgrave was in the top 25 out of all of them. His RAS score is ridiculous. He's about 6'6", 253, with a 36-inch vertical, mind you, over a 10-foot broad, low 4.6 40, and nearly 10.5-inch hands. Like, he is gigantic, he is fast, he is fluid, he is everything you want from a receiving tight end. And truth be told, if he didn't get hurt in the first 2 weeks of his last year at Oregon State, he probably would have put up an absolutely ridiculous season-long stat line and maybe been the first tight end drafted out of all of them. He literally was the Oregon State passing game when he was healthy, and I think that he could very easily turn into that type of weapon in Green Bay as well, at least eventually. I'm not going to predict that he's going to go out there and get 1,000 yards as a rookie tight end because I'm not naive, but I will say this, he's probably going to get at least 600, which in itself is a bold claim, by the way, because that would have put him in the top 10 among tight ends last year, and even then there's only been 12 rookie tight ends ever to put up 600 plus yards. So I still think that he could have a historically good season, at least for a rookie tight end, but I also think that he could be a top 10 performer among all tight ends, rookies, and veterans in his first year. If you're somebody who likes to go do a bunch of best ball drafts on Underdog, by the way, and you're trying to find late round sleepers, as of today, at least the day that I'm recording this, Musgrave is going as TE25 on Underdog, and his overall ADP is about 191, so you're still getting him incredibly late. Not just in best ball drafts, but really on any site that you happen to play on. And I think his ADP is only going to go up from here. I mean, he started out the summer as like tight end 32. He's already at tight end 25 now, like I said. He could very easily climb up into the teens by the time we get to September, and that will have been well earned because he immediately became the starter in Green Bay. All we've heard all summer long is just that coaching staff raving over and over again about how talented he is, how explosive he is, how good he's going to be. I just think the hype is legit. Again, I did a full grade on him coming out of Oregon State, so I kind of got an early start on him, but everything that we've heard in Green Bay is just kind of more of the same from what we heard at Oregon State. He is a special, special talent, and somebody who, at least for me, I'm going to be grabbing in the late rounds in every single league, every single format. because I just don't think I'm ever going to get him at this type of value ever again. Once the cat's out of the bag, it's out for good. The next player on this list is somebody who is probably not going to shock anybody who watches anything I ever make, because over the last 18 months, I have talked about him over and over and over again, but I don't care. I'm talking about him one more time because I think he's that good of a football player. So you're going to sit there and you're going to watch me wax poetic about Alec Pierce again, because deep down I know you love him too. Here's what we know so far about the Colts offense with Shane Steichen and Anthony Richardson. They're going to be going vertical. They're going to be going vertical a lot, actually. And whenever they do go vertical, a lot of those targets are going to be going to Alec Pierce. If you look at Steichen's work in the past, either with Philly or even going back to Justin Herbert's rookie year in LA, Steichen has a history of simplifying the picture for a young quarterback through aggression. And what I mean by that is that when an offense goes vertical down the field, they're calling 989, they're calling 4 verts, whatever concept you want to think of here. When they go down the field, pretty much no matter what coverage is called, everything becomes a one-on-one when it's 20 plus yards down the field. Doesn't matter if it's quarters, doesn't matter if it's cover 3. Hell, doesn't even really matter if it's Tampa 2. Like, there's gonna be a one-on-one deep down the field somewhere. And at that point, it's just on the quarterback to find that one-on-one and throw a bomb. And I really do think that's what the Colts are going to emphasize this year, because that's literally what Steichen did for Jalen Hurts, and that's what he did for Justin Herbert. Obviously, the RPO game is also going to be a heavy influence here. They are going to use the quarterback runs like we saw with Jalen Hurts. There will be a bunch of body blows with stick routes and dragon concepts and all that normal West Coasty type stuff. But when push comes to shove and they need a chunk, it's gonna go to Alec Pierce. He is the closest thing from a physical profile that they have to AJ Brown. He's 6'3", 210 with a 40.5-inch vert. He runs low 4.4. He's a great contested catcher. He's an artist off the line of scrimmage. Like, he does not get enough credit for how good of a route runner he is, or at least how good his release package is against press coverage. Like, he legitimately is an extraordinarily talented young receiver. And we even saw in limited action from the starters in their first preseason game that Richardson will try to go deep to him. I just wish it was complete, but, still, again, the effort was there, the targets were there, the opportunity will be there. That's my point here. We have a freakish physical talent that's going to get targets, he's going to get opportunity, and at the end of the day, that's what really matters the most. Oh, and by the way, beyond just fantasy football and rankings and sleeper values and everything like that, if you're also into season-long pick'ems, which Underdog also has, that's where you can kind of go higher or lower on somebody's season-long yardage total or receptions or touchdowns, whatever. Build a slip out of like 4 or 5 guys that you find either are too undervalued or too overvalued, and kind of go higher or lower on their season-long totals. Alec Pierce is at 550 right now on the projection, which seems super low to me just based on the role that I think he's going to have and the talent that we know he has. So if you're already on Underdog and you're building these season-long slips, just be aware that Pierce is sitting at 550. Try to sneak him into a few of your slips, even if you're doing like $5, $10 ones. That's just a value that you should be aware of. And if you haven't done any season-long slips on Underdog, but it's something that interests you, again, you can use promo code Brett over on UnderdogFantasy.com. They will match your deposit up to $100. So even if you just put in 10, they'll match you with 10. You put in 20, 50, etc., up to 100. They'll just give you a bunch of free money to use on the platform based on that. And you can use it on the season-long pick'ems. You can use it on daily pick'ems. You can use it on best ball, whatever you want to do. But anyway, my point is, Alec Pierce is super undervalued. He's incredibly talented. You should just have him on your fantasy teams as many times as you possibly can, because I think he's about to go off. Now, if you watched last year's running back sleeper video, you noticed a general theme that I really like mid to late round rookie running backs, because usually mid to late round rookie running backs are where you're going to get a lot of value in fantasy football. A couple years ago, I was talking a lot about Khalil Herbert. Last year, I was talking a lot about Dameon Pierce and Brian Robinson. It's just a pretty easy way to get value, and this year is no different. There are still a bunch of rookie running backs that I'm probably going to be investing very heavily into. But in particular, there's one that I have more of a crush on than anybody else. And of course, if you've watched me all summer, you know this by now, but it's Roschon Johnson. I'll be completely honest, I didn't know that Roschon was going to get first-team reps this early. I mean, I knew it was going to happen eventually, but I didn't predict it was going to happen after the first preseason game. I thought we'd at least get into September when he would start getting, some more run with the ones, but we're kind of on that accelerated fast track already, which even by my lofty expectations is quick. And I don't want this segment to sound like it's anti-Khalil Herbert, by the way. I love Herbert. He was one of my top 4 running backs when he was coming out in his draft class, and he's somebody who on a lot of teams would be the starter. But if we're talking specifically about the Bears offense, the types of runs that they prioritize, I do kind of think that Roschon might be a better fit. If you look at the Bears' run concept frequency numbers from last year, which again, if you're a podcast viewer/listener, you already know these, but if you don't watch the bootleg series, this is the first time you're seeing these. But anyway, they were 17th in outside zone last year, but they were 6th in inside zone. And Khalil Herbert, even though I love him, is not the best in inside zone. He's more of an outside zone guy. He's more of, a crack toss guy, get him to the edges, get him some receptions in space. He's not really the banger in between the tackles with inside zone and with duo and power and all that kind of stuff. That's really more Roschon's game, and that type of run game, I think, is what the Bears are really trying to build. If you look at Roschon at Texas last year, he was second among all FBS running backs, and there was hundreds of those, mind you, but he was second among all FBS running backs in missed tackles forced per attempt. He was at 0.49, which doesn't sound like a big number, but that is a monstrously big number for missed tackles forced per attempt. That means that every 2 times he got the ball, he was breaking a tackle. 73.8% of Roschon's yards came after contact. He is incredibly hard to get on the ground. He's got burst. He has kind of unnatural fluidity for somebody who's built like him. Like, he's a big back, but he's got agility. He's got balance. He can pass protect, he can catch the ball a little bit. I'm not saying he's as shifty or as fast as Khalil Herbert, but he does bring that physicality, he brings the size, he brings the tenacity, he brings everything in a bigger back that I kind of think the Bears want to build around right now. He gets a lot of comparisons to DeMarco Murray, which I totally understand, but I think that he's even more fluid than even Murray was. So again, we're looking at a very, very talented young running back who doesn't have a lot of tread off the tires already, and he has 3-down ability, and he's in an offensive system that really fits the types of runs he's good at. I'm not saying that I'm going to start him on my fantasy teams from week 1. I do think that it will take time for him to, slowly eat more and more of that share of touches from Herbert and even from Foreman in that backfield. But by the end of the year, I do think that he will be out-touching everybody else. I think right now, Herbert is the entree and Roschon's the side dish, and by November, it could be the other way around. Keep in mind, as of the day of me recording this, Roschon is RB48 on Underdog, so he's barely an RB4, borderline RB5, and Herbert is going as RB37, so he's just outside of RB3 range. That's not a horrible valuation for Herbert, but it's an even better valuation for Roschon, so if I had to draft one of them, at least for me, if I'm just value hunting, it's going to be Roschon Johnson. Number 4 on this list is kind of unique because A, he's the deepest sleeper on this list by far. Like, I don't even think he has an ADP. He's not getting drafted anywhere, and he shouldn't be. Like, I'm not even drafting him. But on the off chance, which isn't really an off chance historically speaking, but on the chance that Jimmy G gets hurt, or if Jimmy G gets benched for whatever reason, I know that eventually in like October or November, I'm going to get inundated with questions one Thursday night of, hey, should I pick up Aidan O'Connell? This is my preemptive answer to that question. Yes. Yes, you should pick up Aidan O'Connell. He's a really good quarterback who, for whatever reason, slipped to the 4th round. I still don't have an answer for why that happened, but just consider this my PSA of, yes, get Aidan O'Connell. Now, I will admit that I have some level of bias with O'Connell because we got to interview him very early on in the draft process, and we were trying to do the closest thing we could do to a combine-style interview that he would do with the team. So we sat down, we watched tape with him, we went through some pretty bad interceptions that he threw, but we also went through some really nice passes that he hit deep down the field as well. Talking through his reads, talking through the concept, even on things that went wrong, getting his perspective on that. And we were trying to really do a deep dive into what he was as a quarterback, but as well as, kind of get a feel for him as a person. And I came away extremely impressed on both ends. I had him a lot higher in my quarterback rankings than I think a lot of other folks, partially informed by that interview and getting a really good feel for him as a QB and as a person. And my comp for him was Kirk Cousins in all the good and all the bad ways. He does have a tendency to put the ball in harm's way, kind of risking it for the biscuit, I guess is the best way to put it. But he also will hit on a lot of those deep balls as well. So the aggression isn't all bad. You just kind of have to hope that as his career goes on, the INTs will go down and the big plays will go up, just like they did with Kirk Cousins. So I guess this is really more of a dynasty play than anything else. But I do think that, if your back is against the wall and you're in a 2-quarterback league and you got to find somebody else to start because Jimmy gets hurt, knock on wood, we don't want Jimmy to get hurt. But if he does get hurt, and you're staring down the barrel of, can I play Aidan O'Connell this week and feel confident about it? I do think you can. And all I've heard all summer long from my friends that have kept their ear to the ground in Vegas and have eyes in that building is that the Raiders brass thinks that Aidan O'Connell could start this year and they would be fine. Like, they truly think that if something happened to Garoppolo and Aidan stepped on the field, they would not miss a beat. They have felt that since OTAs, and that feeling has continued throughout training camp. They truly do think they have something here. And if you ask anybody on the Raiders beat that also has eyes and ears in that building, they would echo that sentiment. The Raiders brass loves Aidan O'Connell, and if he's been performing in camp anything like what we saw in the first preseason game, I think those thoughts are valid. He looked poised, he looked calm, he was accurate. It just didn't look too big for him. And again, I know it's preseason. It's not the biggest thing in the world, but considering in the same weekend we saw a bunch of other rookie quarterbacks go out there and some of them looked rather flustered, whereas O'Connell did not, you can see that all of his experience as a starter in college has paid off because it just looks like he's done it before. And truth be told, he has done it before. When he was at Purdue, he was outmatched in terms of surrounding talent pretty much every single week. He's going up against all these Big Ten defenses that are loaded with 5-stars and have psychotic defensive coordinators like Jim Leonard that are just throwing the kitchen sink at him every single game. And he stood in there, he took the pressure, he dropped dimes down the field. I just think all of that experience of, never having the supporting cast relative to the teams he was playing against and still being a productive starter, that has only helped him in his transition to the NFL. It has only made him more ready for the NFL, where all the teams are a lot closer in terms of talent level than in college football. So, given all of that, I just think that he could hit the ground running if given a chance to. One more time, I am not advocating that you draft him in the last round of your draft or even drafting him at all, unless you're in Dynasty. That's kind of a different discussion here, but just kind of keep your eye out for Aidan O'Connell because if he does start games this year, and I do think that there's a pretty good chance that he will, I just want to emphasize that he is worth a pickup. I'm trying to get out ahead of this question while I can because it will be asked at some point, and I do think ultimately, even as a rookie, he is going to be a productive quarterback. Number 5 on this list is kind of different because he's not really a sleeper in the traditional sense of the word. You all know who he is. Like, he was a first-round pick last year, for God's sake. But I do think that he's undervalued relative to where he should probably be drafted. So it's kind of a gray area. I just wanted an excuse to talk about Jahan Dotson, so we're going to do that. As of the day of me recording this, Jahan Dotson on Underdog is going as wide receiver 39, which seems really low to me. That means that in a pretty typical 12-man league, he's not even going as a wide receiver 3, he's going as a wide receiver 4, which for a player that is so talented that if he didn't get banged up last year and miss a bunch of games, he probably would have challenged for Rookie of the Year. Just looking at his pace of production, he was outproducing pretty much everybody else. That just seems kind of off to me. And I understand it's a new offensive coordinator this year. It's a new starting quarterback. Well, technically a new starting quarterback because Sam Howell is actually going to get a chance this year. There's a lot of unanswered questions in Washington. I get it. But if we're just watching film and we're watching Jahan Dotson play football, there is no way he is the 39th best receiver in the NFL. And I will fully admit he has exceeded my expectations so far in the league. I didn't think that he was going to be a top 15 pick in the draft. But if we're just judging him based on what he has done since he's gotten in the league, I mean, we're looking at an elite separator versus man coverage. We're looking at somebody who had an elite, and I mean truly elite contested catch rate at over 62%. I actually think he came in at 63.2% if I recall the exact number. That was 11th in the NFL. I'm talking like out of every receiver in the league, he was the 11th best contested catch rate, and he's an elite separator, and he has deep speed, and he has yak ability. There's just so many traits here that I just can't ignore them. I can't put him at wide receiver 39. I get it. The quarterback situation is scary for some people. You know, not knowing what the Eric Bieniemy offense is going to look like is also scary for some people. But I choose to just kind of lean into the talent here and just take the best player. And Jahan Dotson is a better receiver than a lot of the receivers that are going ahead of him right now. Plus, not only that, but I also think that Sam Howell himself is underrated. Like, I thought he played really well in the one game that we actually got to see him play last year, but I also thought he looked good in the preseason game too, when the pocket wasn't entirely collapsing around him in less than 2 seconds. So I actually am encouraged by the quarterback situation myself, which I know is kind of a different opinion than a lot of people have. I also think that Eric Bieniemy is going to be a good coordinator for them. He has experience in a lot of different styles of offenses. You know, he was in Kansas City for a long time, and they kind of blurred the line between spread and West Coast for many, many years, you know, lovingly referring to it as spread coast. There were different personnel packages that they would emphasize from year to year based on the strengths of the team. They would adjust, you know, from year to year to being a vertical offense, to a dink and dunk offense, to a ball control offense. You know, one year they would have an average depth of target of like over 10 yards, and last year they were pretty much dead last in the league. But, you know, they were still number one in yards per attempt because the Chiefs are the Chiefs. But the point I'm trying to convey here is that Eric Bieniemy, while working under Andy Reid, had a lot of experience in a lot of different styles of offenses that they would run from year to year based on who was the quarterback, who are our receivers, who are our tight ends, what are our strengths, what are our weaknesses. And I think that, if anything, the adaptability of Kansas City is what is going to bleed over into Bieniemy in Washington. The one lesson that I think he learned there more than anything else was to build an offense around the talent that is on the field. And Jahan Dotson, for my money, is the second best talent on that offense behind only Terry McLaurin himself. I think this offense will be built around the receivers. I think it will be built around the vertical passing game, because that's also what Sam Howell has shown to be really good at in the past. I think that they will be giving Dotson a lot of chances for huge plays down the field. So I guess you can consider this argument very similar to the Alec Pierce argument before, which is we're looking at an extremely talented receiver that will get targets, that will get opportunities, and ultimately will get more chances to score than a lot of his peers. Even ignoring the ADP thing right now, just looking at season-long projections for the season-long pick'ems on Underdog right now, the projection for Dotson is 4.5 touchdowns on the entire year. I don't know about you, but again, that seems low to me, so I smashed the higher on that at the exact same time that I smashed the higher on Alec Pierce as well. I think both of them are extremely undervalued, not just in fantasy, but also in pick'ems. So, if that also seems low to you, or if the 800 yards that they have projected for Dotson seems low to you, jump on that while you can, I guess, because as we get further and further into preseason, that number is probably going to go up. So I guess overall, my point here is this. Jahan Dotson is a really good football player. I beg of you to not overthink this. okay, we're here. Number 6 on the list. And also our first IDP sleeper that we've ever done on the channel, because some of you are degenerates apparently and care a lot and have requested a lot for me to talk about rookie undrafted dynasty IDP sleepers. You absolute fucking crazy people. But I do respect it. So let's talk about Ivan Pace. If you're wondering how Ivan Pace Jr. went undrafted and then ended up in Minnesota as a UDFA, your guess is as good as mine, honestly. I truly did not see that coming. I thought he could have gotten drafted as early as like early day 3, round 4, round 5. I could have very easily seen him go that high. And instead, he didn't get drafted at all. And I still don't really know why. All I do know is that as soon as he got to Minnesota, he pretty much immediately took the reins of that defense and never gave them back. Not only was he rolling with the ones in training camp, but he was wearing the green dot. That means that he's getting the signals from the sideline. He is calling the defense on the field as an undrafted rookie inside linebacker. That is so abnormal that I don't even remember the last time it happened. That's how rare that is. In terms of skill set and why he was able to get on the field so early, that part was a little bit less surprising, especially knowing that this is a Brian Flores defense that loves to blitz and loves to bring pressure with the inside linebackers. Well, Ivan Pace Jr. was the best blitzing linebacker and arguably the best blitzer, period, in all of college football last year. If we look at total pressure numbers, and again, this is including edge rushers, interior defensive linemen, linebackers, DBs, this is including everybody. Ivan Pace Jr., out of every single defender in college football, he was 24th in pressures. He had 50 of them last year at Cincinnati as an inside linebacker and had a 26.6% pass rush win rate. That is insane. Like, I'm trying to properly convey how not normal this dude is. He was getting pressures and winning on pass rush reps at the same rate as like TJ Watt, okay? And again, he's an inside linebacker that's also really good against the run and rangy and, actually puts guards on their ass when he's plugging against outside zone. There's just no words for this, okay? Like, the situation is rare because, again, you have a very accomplished inside linebacker with a perfect skill set for this defense that somehow went undrafted, immediately came in, immediately started, took over calling signals. And, oh, by the way, he's an elite pass rusher too. This whole situation just screams from the mountaintops IDP sleeper value. He's going to get a lot of sacks. He's going to get a lot of tackles. If you get extra points for tackles for loss, he's going to get a bunch of those too. He had 17 of those last year. That's more than a tackle for loss per game. So if you're in an IDP league that, tries to level the playing field between linebackers and pass rushers, Ivan Pace is kind of the best of both worlds. You could get the normal, double-digit points every single week just from his tackles, like any other linebacker, while also getting the massive boost in points from his pass rush production as well. I'm in like 4 IDP leagues at this point, so I'm trying to get as many shares of Ivan Pace in all of them as I can possibly get, because we know he's going to start from week 1. We know he's going to be out there on the field, and ultimately, I do think that he is going to be that productive. Should he have gone undrafted in the real draft back in April? Absolutely not. Will we try to make it up to him by drafting him in as many of our IDP leagues as we possibly can? You bet your ass we will. All right, before I get out of here, one last shameless plug. If you want the document, the Excel document with all the fantasy rankings, you can get that over on my Patreon. Every single tier of the Patreon has access to it, including the $1 tier. So if you just want to pay $1 for fantasy rankings for you to walk into your home league and come out with a pretty competent team, ideally a competent team, you can go to the Patreon that's linked down below. And of course, if you're interested in any of the season-long pick'ems that I mentioned in this show, or even if you like to do daily pick'ems, just week to week during the season, or if you want to do a best ball draft, Best Ball Mania is still going on. There's $15 million in prize pool this year for Best Ball Mania. It's like the biggest fantasy contest ever. All of that exists over on Underdog. So again, you can use promo code Brett. They'll match your deposit up to $100, and you can do whatever you want with that basically free $100. So for me, I'm using them on a bunch of season-long pick'ems because that's what I tend to enjoy the most. But if you want to do something else with it, that's cool too. Anyway, that's all I have to promote. Hopefully you found this remotely useful when you're building your own rankings. I'm not going to pretend like my rankings are the one list to rule them all, because they're not. Nobody's are. So hopefully just this video gave you something to think about, something to chew on. That's all I can really hope for, is that you just took away something useful from this. But anyway, I'll be back next week with something else that also hopefully you find useful. And until then, cheers.